Last week you came on and told us about the 3 encounters you had with dogmen. I wanted to thank you for coming back to tell us about all these strange things that are going on around your house. Could you fill us in on where you live, however much information you're willing to give on that?
I live in Northern California, north of Sacramento, and just south of the California-Oregon border.
Please give us an idea of what the layout of your property and surrounding area is like.
My house is an older house. It's a really thick brick house. Solid wood beams, 4x6s and 6x8 beams. Solid house. The outlying property has a chain link fence all around. And then the fencing around my yard is wooden 6-foot tall fences. The backyard's split between 2 separate backyards by a wooden gate back behind a shop attached to the house. And then in the back, past my backyard, there's an outlying building. It's probably about 16 feet tall. The beams are 4x4 beams with the tin metal roof angled, used as like a parking garage type of shop area. And it has another shop next to it that it attaches to, like an A-frame metal roof shop. And then behind that, there's a 6-foot chain link fence.
Behind your property, what's going on back there?
Just outside the property, there's a creek that runs pretty much all year, and it goes straight to the Sacramento River. The creek actually comes off the mountains on the west side of the valley. And then there's not a lot of properties up there back behind my house. Open fields, trees, but all the way down into the creek, and it crosses one road. There's a road that goes right down that area, and there's game trails that actually come up through that whole area and then back in the back part of my property. Get deer out there all the time, all kinds of turkey, all kinds of stuff that like to come up to that whole area.
Mike, please tell us about the family that you've got living there in the house with you.
I'm married. I have my wife and my 2 young boys living with me, and I have my dog. She's a chocolate lab mix. She's a pretty big dog. She weighs about 115 pounds. When I'm standing and she's standing up, I can bend my arm a little bit and I can pet her head. She's a big girl.
She sounds like a monster if she's that big.
Yeah, she's a big girl.
I'm glad you've got her there to watch your back. Did your wife believe you when you told her about your dogman encounters before the activity around your home began?
Not before. I didn't tell her about my encounters too much. I kind of started to tell her about it. I saw a little thing on YouTube. It was something else. It wasn't dogman encounters, but I saw it somewhere else, and it kind of triggered that memory in my mind, and I said, I've seen one of those before, and she kind of just looked at me like, what? And I said, yeah, I had seen one, and she kind of like, okay, yeah, right, whatever, and I kind of just blew it off. I didn't continue after that, like from the previous show. People just don't believe it. But after everything started happening, and then I came across the show just by, I don't know, I guess maybe faith or something, and I started listening to your show for some reason, and I was like, man, this is really starting to hit a nerve, and I just said, hey, look, and I sat her down and said, look, I really need to tell you this. I told her about my encounters, and she believed me. She saw the tears falling out of my eyes, and she saw me sweating, and just the tone of my voice, and she's like, yeah, there's no doubt in my mind what you saw was real. I'd never seen you shaken up like this ever. Yeah, I don't get shaken up by things. But this is definitely get shaken up over.
Until you found out about Dogman encounters, you thought you were the only person in the world to have ever had a Dogman encounter. Please tell us about what it was like to go from thinking that to finding out all of a sudden that, no, there are plenty of people that have been through the exact same thing.
Oh, man. It was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. I felt like Atlas. Just finally the earth just, coming off my shoulders, man. I felt great. And that first night after our conversation, I probably had the best night of sleep I've had in years. Just from the fact that, man, I am not crazy, and I'm not the only person that has seen this. Just getting it out, telling the story, and you actually understanding and telling me more about these things that I ever even thought of or even knew. It was very liberating, and it felt really good, and I can't thank you enough.
Oh, you're welcome. You know, to be honest, Mike, I'm not really sure which one of us had a more enjoyable time with that conversation. I was amped to see the response from you. I got the impression that the weight was finally starting to come off your shoulders, finding out that, no, you weren't the only person to have an encounter with one of these things. I wanted to ask you, Mike, has there ever been a point through all of this where your wife blamed you for them coming around? I know it seems kind of outlandish that a spouse would point the finger at her husband in a situation like this, but when things get really stressful and strange like they've been around your house there, I guess it's not out of the question.
No, I don't think she blames me. She definitely doesn't like me talking about it. Every time I talk about it and I listen to the show and I start learning more and more and my feelings start to come back and she can see the changes in my attitude and my mood, and she kind of just says, you need to calm down, you need to knock it off, you're getting yourself all worked up and you need to just stop because you're starting to make me freak out. Just stop. I think it's more of if it's out there, don't tell me. If you see it, don't tell me. I don't want to know. But unfortunately, I took my advice from you and I sat her down and I told her, I said, look, the chances of you seeing this is extremely high because of the amount of times that I have seen it. And it seems to be that the more you see it, the more you're going to see it. Kind of like your perception change. Once you see it, you can start seeing it more and more. Maybe that has something to do with it or not, but, and I said, look, the chance of you seeing this is very high, and if you do see it, don't ever look it in the eyes. Don't look at the eyes, because that's an image you are never going to be able to erase from your mind. You'll just have that fear, and I don't want you to look out a window at night and see these eyes and have these night terrors that I have. Just don't look at the eyes. She looked at me and said, are you crazy? If I saw something like that, do you think I would look it in the eyes?
Yeah, that wouldn't be good, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Mike, let's get to the strange things that have been going on around your property. Tell us about the loud noises you've been hearing out on that outbuilding's roof every night for I don't know how long.
It started probably about 2 months ago, where it would happen every once in a while. At about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, I would hear a loud bang, something landing on the roof, on that tin roof, just a boom. And then I would hear footsteps, like walking across the thing. it'll take like 2 or 3 steps, and it's bipedal. When something's walking up on the metal roof, you can tell if it's 4-legged or 2-legged. I mean, it's crystal clear. But it's a bipedal sound, and it sounds like when it walks, you can hear the claws just scratch the metal as it lifts its foot as it's walking forward. And it would take a few more steps, like it's getting a running start, and it would jump. And you can hear the metal press down and then landing in the dirt. And then it would take a few more steps. I could hear that at about 3 o'clock in the morning. It would happen every once in a while. But then it started getting closer and closer to where it was, maybe once every few nights, and it would go to like every other night. And then it was every night I was hearing it. The same sound up on that roof in the same exact area and location. I didn't think really anything of it, but the feeling I had, like from my other encounters, the feeling that something was there. At first, I didn't really put the two together. I recognized the feeling. I couldn't place it. But then I found your site, and I was listening to all the encounters, reading the stories, and listening to what these things like to do. And then the puzzle was coming together. Then it hit me that is exactly what I was feeling. And that is what I'm seeing. Now, I can feel them around, without hearing that sound. I can hear them, I can feel them around, and sometimes I can't even feel them around. Some nights are really good, where they're not around at all, and I'm completely safe going outside. But other nights, I can feel them outside, and I'll wait till the morning to take out my trash.
Oh, I don't think anyone could blame you on that. I can't imagine what that would be like to know that just outside you've got something or some things like that. We still haven't nailed down whether it's one or if it's a group, but I've never told you about this, Mike, through all the conversations we've had, but I can't tell you how impressed I am with your fortitude to hold it together the way that you have through all the things that have happened to you and been happening to you as we talk. I mean, Friday night, we're talking, and you heard that crazy deep howl. Speaking of which, before we go any further with the other questions I wanted to throw at you, tell us about that if you don't mind.
I had a friend of ours, their parakeet had gotten out. They've been chasing it and trying to catch it pretty much all day, and so that the last time they saw it was down the road in the group of trees. And my wife said, "Hey, would you mind walking down there and seeing if you can find it and see if you can catch the bird for him?" I said, "Yeah, sure, not a problem." And, I walked down there, and, that's where the game trail comes across down towards the creek, and it, crosses the road, and right in that area is really thick brush and trees, and over in that area, a lot of turkey fed down there, and a ton of deer. I probably saw about 10 to 12 deer at the end of that game trail right there. And, I took a few pictures of them, and, they weren't too skittish, but in that area. And then, it started to get kind of dark, and I didn't like the situation I was in. It didn't feel right. So I started walking back. It was just after sundown. So the sun was already down. It was already almost starting to get dark. Probably maybe a quarter of a mile walk that I did. And so I walked back to my house, and I went out through the house and out to my backyard to take a picture of the hole in my chain link fence. And I thought, you know, hey, this is probably a good time to get this picture now before it gets dark. And I took the picture. My dog was with me, and I took the picture of the hole, and not 10, 15 seconds after that, I took that picture, I heard this deep, deep howl that was no dog. It was no wolf, because we have no wolves here. Deep, deep howl. It was kind of distant. My dog perked up. She heard it, and her tail dropped between her legs, and she kind of whimpered and took off running towards the house. That's when my stomach dropped, you know, and I thought to myself, yeah, it's time to go back in. And that's when I walked back in.
When we were talking about whatever it was when that howl happened on Friday night, I remember all of a sudden it hitting me. I started looking at the clock thinking, oh wow, it's got to be either dark or right on the edge of dark there where Mike's at. And then I'm thinking to myself, what in the world is he doing out there right by the woods when it's either dark or dusk? I remember giving you a hard time about being out there like that, exposed.
Oh yeah, you give me a hard time about that.
Yeah, I don't want to see you become a statistic or anything.
No. You know, from my experiences with them, you know, I can feel when they're close. I mean, I can feel them, like when they're within 100 yards or so. I could feel it. I know that they're there. But at that time, I didn't feel them there. But the sound had to have been that. It had to have been them. Because the sound triggered that feeling in me. There was no dog. I know the different types of howls that dogs do. And we have no wolves in this area. There just isn't any. The way my dog reacted to it, you know, I'm very, very keen on watching the behavior of my dog. She lets me know when things are getting kind of weird, when things are around that I can't see or hear. Thankful for that.
For anyone listening trying to imagine what one of their howls sounds like, it does sound a lot like what you would expect a werewolf's howl to sound. Deep, powerful, with a little bit of anger mixed in sometimes. Moving on, Mike, you just mentioned the hole in the fence. Could you tell us about that? What's going on? I've seen that picture that you took of the hole, and it just blew me away.
I started hearing the sounds. I went to that part of the backyard area back behind my house and trying to figure out what it was. And I went back there, and it's really dry sand. There's just grass on the ground and kind of leaves, and so you can't really make out any prints out there. It's really, really, really difficult, if not almost impossible, in this area. When you're walking across it, it's almost like a crabgrass over very rough sand. So you can't really see it. You can see depressions, but you can't make out an actual track. And so I'm walking around in that area. There's a little gap around this little outbuilding around the parking area for that area where I hear the footprints on. And I go looking back there, and I see this huge hole in my fence. Somebody that's just a little over 6 feet tall could easily bend over and walk into this hole. And the hole, it's pressed down at an angle towards the building. So the chain link fence is bent and pressed in with such force that something pried it open and pushed it open, and it's cut. Like, it's ripped in the middle of the chain link fence. So there's no gap, there's no hinge or anything. It's just ripped apart and then pushed to one side so whatever can get through the fence. And I've noticed a slight game trail slowly starting to build up through that area. And I noticed that when we first moved in here, we had tons of feral cats. I mean, there were so many. Over the last couple of months, they've been slowly starting to disappear. They're just missing. Now there's maybe 2 that are still around.
I remember you telling me about that hole in the fence, and then seeing the picture that you snapped on Friday night and sent to me. Speaking of which, I'm going to post that picture and some other pictures that you've taken and sent to me. I'm going to post them on the YouTube version of this show so the listeners can take a look at them and see what we're talking about here. But as you look at that picture of the hole that's been ripped in that chain link fence, you've got to ask yourself, what kind of power would it take to do that? I mean, it's just absolutely crazy. I've never heard of anything like that before. Now, Mike, do they only seem to come around at night, or do they sometimes come around during the day, too?
There was a few times where I felt them around in the daytime. It doesn't matter weekend or weekday. There's times during the day where I feel them. I usually try and keep my dog pretty close to me or around me because I like to watch her and see how she reacts to things. I love my dog. I really love her. Watching her react to certain things makes me feel safer, you know, especially since I feel these things. But then recently, I've not been able to feel them as strongly as I have. Because there's times where I haven't felt them, but how my dog reacts when I did feel them around, she reacted in the same manner, but I never felt them. So I don't know what is up with that.
You told us about how big your dog is and how you take her out there with you when you go out to the edge of the yard and into the woods, but I think in our first conversation you were telling me about how she's been displaying this strange behavior when it would appear that they're around. Tell us about that.
Let me paint this picture real quick. There's 2 sliding glass doors on either side of the dining room. My dining room is pretty big. I don't know the exact dimensions, but it's a huge dining room. And the doors are 6 foot tall by 8 feet wide. And they're both on either side. We have no shutters or curtains on them at all. So they go straight to the backyard. And at night, it just looks like black glass. And since the cats were around, she would be staring out there and she'd kind of get all excited and kind of just whine and want to go play. And she's like kind of just jump in the door because she likes to chase them off and like to try and play with the cats. But when I walk by these doors, sometimes I get this feeling that something's watching me and something's standing there. And, you know, I call my dog over and she wouldn't come. She kind of just sit there and kind of just look over at the sliding glass door and she wouldn't come near me. The further away from the door I got, I'd get closer to her and almost into the living room area, and I'd call her and she'd kind of walk up to me, but kind of slowly. I would walk back to that door and she wouldn't come. You know, she was almost cowering, which was really weird. And that door area, she won't go anywhere near it at nighttime at all. She avoids this one door like a plague at night. During the day, she's fine. She runs around there and she likes to lay down, and the sun comes through that door and she likes to just soak up the sun, but at night she won't go anywhere near it. Recently, it's been starting to do the other door too at night, where she gets really quiet and she stands away from the door, her tail's down, almost tucked under her legs. The hair on her back is standing straight up, and she won't make a sound, and she just kind of slowly walks away backwards and lays down into a corner somewhere where you can't see either door in a corner where she lays.
Before we go into the unfortunate incident that happened to your son, could you tell us about the issues you've been having where it sounds like a claw has been tapping on your windows around the house?
Yeah, that's creepy. I can feel him around, and I keep myself calm. I don't say anything to my wife. I don't want her to freak out. I don't want her to be scared. You know, we just moved into this house a few months ago, and I really don't want to move again. I hate moving with a passion. So I kind of keep it to myself. I don't want her to just hear it and then, what is that? And kind of walk over to a window. And then, boom, there it is. But I kind of keep it to myself. And every once in a while, you hear like a little scratch, kind of just like going across the screen, or a little tap on the window. So if you have long fingernails, like somebody who has almost like acrylic nails, you tap on a window, that nail tapping, it's almost what it sounds like, but it's a little bit deeper, like it's thicker. And it happens on random windows around the house. Not always the same window. Right in my bedroom, there's a higher window. It's probably 7 feet off the ground. And I would hear it towards the top of the window. I lay there and kind of just look up, and I have blinds on that one, but I don't open the blinds. I don't want to know. And then right outside my bedroom, there's a security light, there's a motion sensor, and constantly goes off. You know, especially the nights that I feel them around. It'll go off. We put up like blackout curtains so the sun likes to come in on that side a lot. So we kind of put blackout curtains up on that door there, at the sliding glass door. So it keeps going off, and my wife would kick me and and so, you know, nothing's there. It's just the cats. They're walking around. She's like, no, there's no cat. There's something there. I said, no, there's nothing there. Just go back to sleep. She's like, the light's not going to go off. I'm like, watch, it'll go off here in just a minute. It'll go off. And then it would come back on again. But then I would hear a tapping from another window on the other side of the house. I never caught a glimpse of them in the light, ever. Every once in a while, I'll catch a glimpse of movement back into the back corner shadows of my house. There's a lot of dark areas, dark corners in my house. It's not a square house. It's got multiple walls and different angles. There's just no way I can really illuminate my house properly. But yeah, there's just random parts of the house and lights going on and off outside from my motion sensors, and you can't see anything there. And my dog, she knows there's something there. I can't see it.
When you told me that sometimes you'll be laying in bed late at night, and then all of a sudden your dog will open up, start growling right next to the bed because of something that she senses right outside. Having gone through what you've gone through with these things with dogmen, and then all of a sudden being snapped out of a sound sleep by the sound of a big deep growl like that right next to the bed, that's got to be awful.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You're in a deep sleep, and all of a sudden you're in an adrenaline rush with your dog growling, and just that loud, get out of here type of bark, or, you know, the bark that's like, hey, I'm here and I'm bigger than you type of bark, and her hair standing up and she's walking backwards out of the room, you know, still staring at the door. Yeah, that's really creepy.
Oh, I'd say. Now, we've set the table for the very unfortunate incident that happened to your son. I remember when we talked that first time, I was hoping I could head an incident like this off at the pass, but this had already happened before we even spoke, so that went right out the window, no pun intended. But anyway, please tell us about what happened that night.
My son, he has a bunk bed, and it was a bunk bed that I made for him. I made him if anybody's familiar with Star Wars, but I'm a big Star Wars fan. I made an AT-AT bunk bed for my son. He loves it. But this one side of the bed, it's just kind of open up against the wall, and I kind of push it up towards the window, so, you know, he can lay there and open up the window and look outside and whatnot. One night, in the middle of the night, he was sleeping. I heard his blind kind of open, and I'm laying there and I'm listening. He opened his blind, and then he slams it shut and trying to get it shut, and slams it shut, and then I can hear him climb out of his bed and run into my room, and he's like, Daddy. Yeah? Like, what's wrong, buddy? He's like, I had a nightmare. You had a nightmare? Like, what's wrong? He's like, Dad, I saw a monster. But a monster? I said, there's no monster, buddy. He's like, no, Dad, I saw a monster. I said, were you dreaming? He said, yeah. I said, well, did you just have your blind open? He said, yeah. I said, well, how could you be dreaming? Like, why did you have your blind open? He's like, oh, I was looking at the stars. And then I saw a monster outside my window. And I tried to get him to talk to me about it, to see what he saw. He wouldn't really give me any details of what he saw. And he kind of just shuts down and just won't talk about it. So the details of what he actually saw, I don't know. He doesn't like your avatar for Dogman Encounters. He doesn't like it. It scares him to death. And he always tells me to turn it off. So I think that might have been what he saw outside his window.
Sounds like one might have tapped on the window. I guess he did say he was looking at the stars, so maybe he was stargazing and then one came into view.
Well, outside his window, there's a tree so that he can't really see stars. There's like almost like a cedar tree kind of growing out at an angle, a very short one, kind of going out his window, so he really can't see the stars. And it's really dark on that corner of the house where his room is at. So I'm thinking that he saw something or heard something and opened his blind, and bam, there it was. And that's what I am guessing. He's not really giving me too much details. I'm still trying to get some information out of him, but I don't want to terrify him too much.
He's still young. Knowing what age he is old enough to remember things at that age for the rest of his life, but somehow, some way, I sure hope he can put that out of his mind and forget that. I don't want that to haunt him for the rest of his days. That's horrible.
Yeah, he doesn't like to go outside the house once it gets dark. Even with our porch light on, our carport light on, he won't come out here at night. He doesn't like it. And his bedroom is actually towards the front of the house where it had happened, so yeah, he doesn't like it.
Oh, I can understand. I don't think anyone could blame him for that. Do you know of anyone in the area who has had similar problems with tapping on their windows and other strange things like that happening?
Not that I heard about tapping on windows or walking on roofs, but cats have been kind of disappearing randomly around the neighborhood. And at night, you can kind of hear the dogs barking, almost in like a synchronized way, so you can kind of hear the distances of the bark and the bark of the houses that kind of line the creek area and up towards the back end of my house, just how they're barking and then getting quiet. You can hear something going down that game trail towards the back end of my house and into the neighborhood. I mean, you can hear it all the time. So there's still something kind of roaming around.
All right, Mike, what would have to happen? I know you mentioned the fact that you absolutely hate moving, but what would have to happen for you to throw in the towel and decide to move?
Something happening to my family. If my wife, probably if my wife actually sees it here on the property, or it gets too brave and tries to come into the house, or we confront it coming outside to go to work in the morning, or even just enjoying, because we like to have company. We have company over the weekend sometimes, and, random nights during the week. Even if something comes like around at that time, then we would probably throw in the towel and move then. It was just too close for comfort. It's not really bothering me too much with them kind of just roaming around and kind of being curious. But it's another when you do something else. That's when I draw the line.
It's so hard to understand how they could have found you there in the first place. I don't understand why you had the 3 encounters to start with, but the fact that they found you and where you lived, that's just something I'll never be able to figure out. It's just so hard to understand. When did all this begin? Through all of our talks, I never did ask you this. How long has this been going on?
It started happening probably about a month and a half, 2 months ago, when things really started happening. I'm guessing it happened when I kind of went on a hike by myself. I like to go on hikes, and I like to find new areas. I really kind of want to take my son hiking. He's getting older and into scouts, and I kind of want to prepare him for Boy Scouts. And so I went and found this new trail area on the BLM land. And I'd probably guess this area is about maybe 10 miles from my house, maybe. And it's right along the Sacramento River area. Up in that area, there's just open land, all the way around. So from that area, you can go up through around where I'm at and back around to the back end of my property. So, it's just wide open out here. And so I went hiking out there and just enjoying my day and walked down this trail, probably about 2 miles down this trail, and decided to turn back, and I saw another trail that was just a little further down from the trail that I hiked up on, and I went down this game trail to that trail and started walking back, and there was, I'm out there all by myself. There's nobody. The last person I saw out there was a mountain biker when I first got on that trail, and he actually took that lower trail that I decided to take back towards my truck, but he was long gone. And he was actually pulling up to his car from his bike. So it was just me out there all by myself. So I take this lower trail back down closer towards the river and hiking back on this trail, and I started to get this feeling that something's watching me. It's that same feeling I had from my other encounter, that I'm being watched very closely. And it's studying me, like you're being studied and almost hunted. In this area that I kind of walked up onto, it got dead quiet. Up into that area, there was a lot of lizards, a lot of squirrel. There were butterflies all over the place, birds all over the place. And then when I got into this area, it was a little grove area, really thick brush, probably 7, 8 feet tall, really, really, really thick. Can't really see through it. And it got dead quiet. There was no birds, there were no butterflies, no lizards, no squirrel, nothing was moving. And that's when I kind of grabbed my hunting knife, held my hand on my knife, unbuckled it, just so I can unsheath it really quick. And I'm walking down this trail, steady pace, nothing quick, not too slow, but just to be aware and looking over my shoulders all the time. And then I started hearing that pacing sound again off to my left-hand side. You know, the step in the leaves, like the same heavy step sound. And I kind of almost freaked out again. You know, I've had this before. I know this feeling, and the image triggered in my mind again. I'm thinking, oh my God, how is this possible? There's no way. Is this the same thing that I saw down in Southern California? And I did the same thing. It stopped. And it's in the bushes just off to the left. I'm walking back, take another step, take another step. I start going again. I'm thinking, okay, I'm not going to play this game. And I kind of just started walking at a steady pace, and I see this game trail that kind of went up off to the left-hand side, and the shrubs area started to end, you know, within a couple of feet of that trail. I turned and started walking up that trail, and I looked back to my left to see if I can look inside the shrub area, and I see something big go through the shrub onto the trail that I was just at. I didn't get a full glimpse of what it was, but it was definitely something big, and stepped onto the trail where I was just at. And then I continued back up on that trail, looking over my shoulder all the time, looking back behind me, keeping my ears open. And I got back onto the trail where I was at, and there was just squirrel everywhere. Lizards, birds, the sounds, the normal sounds of the nature, everything. And it just seemed like that area was just like, almost like a kill box is what it sounded like, or felt like. So I get back up there, and I hike back to my truck, and I get in and I drive home. And the only thing I can think of is maybe whatever I came across out there on that trail tracked me down, and it's kind of just harassing me or curious, or I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of.
How far did you say that trail system was from your house?
About 10 miles, maybe.
Okay, about 10 miles. Well, I guess that's not out of the realm of possibility that one of them did follow you home that way. One way or the other, it sure sounds like one of them did.
I think you're right, because of the frequency of things and how things have happened. You know, it slowly started progressing more and more as time has gone on. So it seems like they were kind of scouting, and then now it's boom, yep, yeah, he's here. Yeah, this is it. That's what it seems like.
I know when we first started talking, things seemed to be building up, but at least at this point, from what you've said, it sounds like things are kind of calming down a little bit. I hope that trend continues.
Yeah, I hope so. It's been kind of quiet now for the last 4 nights or 5 nights or so.
Thank goodness. Now, shifting gears here, Mike, when we first started talking, you were in such a bad way, and understandably so because of all the things that had been happening and what you had been through, that I suggested that you talk with another eyewitness that I knew of and that I'd been talking with to compare notes on the night terrors that both of you had been and have been currently suffering. I'm not going to reveal this gentleman's name, and I hope you don't either, but could you please tell us about that and how you consequently told me it helped you?
It was really weird as my night terrors were pretty similar to this person's as well. And it seems like they put that, they have some kind of control over that, because it's the same dream every night, all the time. But then, until recently, once I realized this is a dream, I had kind of altered the dream a little bit. But it has been nice to know that somebody else out there, I guess I wouldn't say nice to know, kind of horrible to say, but I guess comforting to know that there's somebody else out there who's having the same issues that I am. And it's been helpful for me to talk about it and to have somebody else talk to with similar feelings and worries and terrors. Hopefully I've been able to help him, and, you know, I know he's helped me. Yeah.
Well, I can tell you 100% without any doubt that you have helped him tremendously, the way that you told me it was a huge help for you as well. That's the biggest reason right there where I put you two guys together so that you could compare notes. So, yeah, I'm really glad that helped.
Yeah, it's helped a lot. You know, it's interesting to see that how the people that have these night terrors, a lot of the night terrors are pretty similar, and it's the same night terror over and over and over again. And, you know, like I said, you know, until recently, once I realized I'm actually dreaming, I have been actually able to alter it a little bit, where, you know, it's kind of helped me not have as bad of a night terror. So.
Well, that's great. I'm glad it at least helped, to whatever degree it did. I hate to ask this question, but it's only due diligence that I ask this. Have you seen, to date, any concrete evidence that points towards it being a fact that dogmen are at the root of all this strange activity?
No concrete fact. The only thing I can go off of is my experiences and my feelings about what had happened to me. The same feeling I get when I saw them there, when they were physically there. That feeling comes back. You know, like I said, I'm not afraid of the dark. I'm not afraid of the woods. It doesn't bother me at all. I've got a very strong hold mentally, you know, about my imagination. I don't let it run wild. I like to see what's really there, and I go off of my feelings, my instincts, and my instincts have not proven me wrong yet. My instincts are telling me, yeah, this is what's going on here. And, you know, like I said, there's some nights that I feel them there, and there's other nights I don't feel them there. I'm perfectly comfortable going out into my backyard at night. But there's other nights where I don't even like walking near my sliding glass doors at night, because I know that they're there.
I've got no doubts, Mike, that what's at the root of all that strange activity around your house is a dog man. When you look at all the evidence, it just points in that direction. I can't see it being anything else. Having said that, when you go out at night, do you do anything special to protect yourself?
Around my house?
Yeah.
Only thing I do is I make sure all the lights are on around my house. They don't like to be in light, illuminated at nighttime. I think it might hurt their vision or something. Or they just don't want to be seen at night. They like the fear factor, the ambush factor, the one-up factor is what I'm getting from them. So I try and have as much light on as I can in the areas that I'm going to be at.
That's a good idea. That's about all you can do to protect yourself. Well, Mike, in closing, do you have any comments you'd like to make?
Well, just trust your instincts. That's what they're there for. If your instincts tell you something, just listen to it. If you have family members telling you that they've seen these things, or they've seen something, or they feel something, and they hear something, take it for what it is. Don't try and be scientific about it. Don't try and, hey, I want physical proof about this. Just take it for what it is. Believe people. It really, really helps people cope with what they saw and what they're feeling.
Well, Mike, I can't thank you enough for coming back on and filling us in on all the strange activity that's been going on around your house. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Vic. I really hope I can help.
Oh, you have. Just by putting that info out there, you've done more than you'll ever know. Again, thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you, Vic. I just hope I'm able to help people out. I mean, I really want to help.
Well, let's appreciate it. Well, don't be a stranger, okay?
No, I definitely won't.
Thanks again, Mike. I hope you have a great night.
You too, Vic. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. If you've had a dogman encounter and you want to speak with me, whether in private or on the show, you can reach me at contact@dogmanencounters.com. I'd love to hear from you. Before we bring on tonight's guest, I received 2 encounters I'm going to read for you. The first encounter reads, "Before I tell you the story, you need to know that my encounter happened when I was 12. I was born and raised in Dallas, Texas, so I'm pretty used to city life. I was always fascinated by cryptids, Bigfoot the most, but as time passed, I forgot all about it and moved on. My family and I would go on camping vacations in which we would camp in the woods for about a week or so. I remember not being afraid at all, as the nearest highway was less than a mile away. 4 to 5 cars were passing by every minute on it. I would always hear strange noises coming from the woods, but there was always a natural explanation for them. Raccoons and squirrels were always in and around the camping spot. Occasionally they'd get into our tents in search of food. One summer we stopped going. I had no idea why. I asked my dad about it, and he said that it was getting to be too dangerous. I just went along with it and carried on. I found it strange that he said that, so I went online with all of my 10-year-old vocabulary's might and tried to find any animals that lived in the woods that could kill a human. The only ones I found were venomous spiders and coyotes. Figuring that it would only be a couple of months until our next trip, I shrugged it off. Funny thing is, it would be another 2 years until we went back into the woods. The day came, we were all suited up and driving miles into the woods with some of my uncles. When we arrived, nothing in the camping spot had changed except for the rust covering the benches and spiderwebs all around a small shed which housed a bathroom. Everything was going well. My uncles were having a barbecue. My parents were with them, laughing and telling jokes, and I was on the edge of a small pond, playing with the sand and throwing rocks into the water. That's where it first happened. I was drawing with a stick in the sand when I noticed shrubs moving across the pond from me. I thought it must have been an animal, but then the shrubs moved again. That was when I noticed a black shape behind the shrubs hiding in the cottontails. It wasn't moving. That automatically made me scared. I leaned to my side to see more of it. That's when I saw its entire body. It was extremely muscular. I couldn't see its face as the shadow of its own body was blocking its face from my sight. I was petrified. That's when my fight-or-flight instincts kicked in. Being a 140-pound 12-year-old, I ran as fast as I could back to the camping spot. By then, I was crying and screaming. All heads turned towards me. My mom ran toward me and hugged me. She asked me what was going on. I just kept screaming, "We have to go, we have to go." Mom, being oblivious, calmed me down and told me to behave. As time passed, I was calm but still scared. I was trying to figure out what I had seen. I was trying to decide if it had been a common animal I had simply misidentified, but the only animal I could think of was Bigfoot. That's when I noticed the look on my dad's face. He looked worried to death and was constantly glancing at the tree line. I knew he knew why I was so scared. That night, everyone was asleep in their tents except me. It was a moonlit night. The crickets were making noise as well as the frogs and toads. It was about 11 p.m. when all the sounds of the forest went silent. It was so quiet I could hear my uncle snoring in the tent beside us. I knew something was wrong. A couple of seconds later, I heard faint footsteps coming from the tree line. The footsteps got closer and closer to the point where it was right in front of our tent. It was casting a shadow over the tent. That's how I was able to see the entire silhouette of it. One thing that awed me was how tall it was. It was at least 6 or 7 feet tall. That's when I saw something twitch on the top of its head. It had canine ears. I instantly knew it wasn't a Bigfoot. I was petrified again. I didn't want to make a sound, so I closed my eyes and tried to sleep. The next morning, oddly enough, I woke up in the car. We were going home. We had all heard and seen it. My parents never spoke of it again. Signed, Michael Raw. The next encounter was received from Joe Schaefer. This encounter reads, I'm an Aboriginal person from the Cree tribe up in Canada's Northwest Territories. I come from a family of hunters and trappers and am familiar with all the animals in our region, or so I thought. I've been hunting in the forest alone since I was 10 years old. It was nothing for me to pick up my grandfather's double-barreled .410 shotgun and be gone all day hunting for small game, never giving a second thought to the dangers that may have been lurking out there. It was in the spring of 2002 when my second oldest son and I went hunting ducks at a location approximately 25 miles northeast of our community, at a place known to us as the Foxholes. It's a very large swampy prairie area that goes on for miles and miles. It's an excellent habitat for waterfowl, and they usually congregate there in great numbers during the spring migration. The day we went hunting, my son and I were the only two hunters in the area. That was probably because it was a weekday and most people were working. I pulled my son out of school for the day so that he could come with me. It was about 11 a.m. when we arrived on site. It was clear and sunny with a mild breeze blowing from the north. We each proceeded to build a duck blind. My son set up his duck blind about a quarter-mile away from me near a little pond facing the opposite direction to where I was. We hunted all afternoon and into the evening when suddenly we heard a very loud howling. The hairs on the back of my neck immediately stood up. I got up and looked in the direction the sound was coming from. It was coming from a nearby tree line directly behind us, about half-mile away. This howling was like nothing I had ever heard before, and it wasn't coming from any animal I recognized. I looked over to where my son was and saw that he was out of his blind and on his way over to me. When he got to where I was, he asked me, what was that howling? I said that I didn't know. We stood around looking at the tree line for a bit and then decided to pack up and leave for home. We didn't say much on the way home other than trying to guess what kind of creature was howling back along the tree line. We didn't know. A couple of days later, I asked an old friend of mine if he had ever heard this kind of howling. I imitated the sound as best I could for him. He said that last year on one of his canoeing trips down a secluded creek, he and this other fellow he was with heard something exactly like that. They were getting ready to bed down for the night in their tent along the creek when they heard the howl. He estimated that it was fairly close to them, but it was difficult for him to judge distance in the thick forest. He had never heard anything like that before either and couldn't connect it to any animal that he knew of. In conclusion, I have never heard that kind of howl before, and I haven't heard that kind of howl since. Whether it was a dogman or not is anyone's guess, but I'm not ruling it out. Anything's possible. We have miles and miles of forested area in the north where nobody has ever been, and any creature such as Dogman or Sasquatch can easily stay hidden, forever if it so chooses. Thanks for sending that story in, Joe. I appreciate it. There's one last thing I want to share with you before I bring Kunbo on. If you have any question or questions for me, it's easy to reach me and ask those questions in the chat room every Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. If you go to dogmanencountersradio.com/chat room, you'll see how you can log in. To join us in the chat and ask your question, it's really easy. All you have to do is either use your Facebook account to log into the chat, or if you go to chatwing.com, it only takes seconds to register and get your own account. Tonight's guest is Tim Kunbo Baker. Kunbo, welcome to Dogman Encounters Radio. Thanks so much for coming.
Glad to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you. Before we go any further, I want to clarify something for the listeners. There are quite a few people that listen to this show that don't listen to Bigfoot-based shows, so they probably haven't heard you do a show before to know what the term booger refers to. So you all know the term booger refers to a Bigfoot. That's just a term that Coonbo and Bear, who hopefully will be a guest on an upcoming show, that's how they refer to Bigfoot.
I had been hearing about the creature that we know as Bigfoot for decades before I ever heard the word Bigfoot. The first word that I ever heard used in reference to a Bigfoot was catamount. That's what my grandfather and my dad called them, was catamounts. People may doubt this, but I remember it very, very clearly when I was 3 years old. At that point, I was beginning to wander around some on the farm, and, and I would walk, even at that young age, I would walk about a little over a quarter of a mile by myself from our house over to my grandparents' house. And I was starting to, piddle around and stuff outside, and my grandfather took me back to a tree that was up on a ridge out east of their house. And he told me, he said, "Boy, you see that tree right there?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Those catamounts sit up in that tree and watch us. They watch the house. And when I come back here, they jump down out of that tree and they run off down in that holler right there." Well, a holler is like a draw or a little small valley. I remember I said, "Well, what's a catamount?" He said, "Well, that's a good question. It's sort of like a cross between like a bear and a monkey." And I thought, I really didn't know what to think about it. Well, sometime later on, my dad was talking about catamounts. I said, "Daddy, what's a catamount?" He said, "Well, it's sort of like cross between maybe a bear and a monkey with possibly some little bit of cat mixed in it or something, because it can climb like a cat, but bears can climb too. So I don't know, but but then the neighbors would call them boogers, and then some of them would call them haints, some of them would call them wild men, some of them hairy men, and some of them would call them no-heads. And as a matter of fact, there's a holler that goes up onto the corner of our farm called No-Head Holler, or No-Head Holler. And there's a road down there to this day right now called No-Head Holler Road. If you look on a topo map right now to this day, and you find No-Head Holler and follow it out to the southeast, and you go up over a shallow, a low sort of a rise, some people might call it a ridge, but it's really not much of a ridge. But then it goes down into a creek bottom out on the south of that. And that creek bottom is called Booger Bottom, because it's got boogers in it. They pass through there periodically. They migrate from out to the south around Bankhead National Forest. They stay there during the summertime, and in the early fall they migrate to the northward up along the Tennessee River. And they pass through Booger Bottom on the way. And they hang around along the river till about April, and then migrate back to the south into the Bankhead National Forest.
That's something. I never knew there was a road named like that.
Yeah, there sure is. I can send you a picture of it. The road sign, No-Head Holler. No-Head Holler Road.
That's pretty good. I never knew about that.
Yeah.
Please give us a brief bio on yourself.
I was born and raised in northwest Alabama in the Muffle Shoals area, and lived on a farm out east of Muffle Shoals the first several years of my life. And while out on that farm, as I was a young kid, I became aware that there were some kind of boogers or haints or catamounts or no-heads or something that lived out there on the farm. Didn't really think that much of them at the time, although, I heard them and I heard people talking about them. Got up in high school. Some years later, one of the guys that I went to high school with had an encounter. He and his brother were very shaken up by it. They told about it at school, and he was ridiculed extremely. So I learned then that best to keep my mouth shut about the things that I had seen and heard of out on our farm. Then went off to college and didn't really think much of it. Went to Auburn University, got out in 1978, started working for a electrical engineering department of a utility company and spent several years doing that. Sort of got back into things concerning Bigfoot because of some incidents that I had out on the farm when I moved back out there. Suddenly things that I hadn't thought about in years and years and years, I started thinking about again because I started hearing some of the same things and seeing some of the same things. And the year before I got married, had my first fairly close-up encounter with one. Didn't actually see it. I could tell where it was because it was shaking trees and, saplings and stuff at me while it was screaming. I could hear it stomping back and forth. That report some years later actually wrote it up and it's on the BFRO website. You can read about it. And just about 1 year later, this is after I had gotten married. I'd been married about a few months, and we were living out on the farm. We had an encounter where I actually saw it for the first time clearly. It scared my wife half to death, my wife at the time. And exactly 1 week later, we were no longer living on the farm. We moved to Huntsville, Alabama, and went to work for a government contractor in Huntsville and started traveling a lot for the government over the next several years. And, I hadn't really planned on doing Bigfoot research in other places, but, sometimes I would get stuck there on TDY for sometimes weeks at a time. Well, I never was one to waste a lot of money going to nightclubs and stuff like that, so in my free time I would be out in the boonies somewhere, rooting around. And I ended up hearing about Bigfoot stories and stuff and sightings and things, just sort of accidentally. I realized here's an opportunity that I can do research in areas that I would normally never be able to get to go to, both on government installations and in the areas around them. So I researched Bigfoot very extensively all over the country for quite a number of years just by myself. And I had a couple of work buddies that were interested in it too. And sometimes if we were on TDY together, we would go out together. But the majority of it was by myself. That went on all through the 1980s and the 1990s. And I had no idea that there was any kind of interest about Bigfoot on the internet. Of course, when I first got started, the internet wasn't even in existence, but I started working with the government's version of the internet back in the mid-80s and wasn't really interested in getting on it very much from the recreational aspect of it. I had to use it at work all the time. Some years later, a good friend of mine in the Bigfoot world, his handle is Bubba Gump. He and I had done some investigating together. We'd done a lot of talking about it over the years, and been a friend of mine since back in the 70s, and had spent a lot of time out at our farm with me, and had, seen and heard stuff, and we had hunted together a lot. And anyway, he got to talking to me about other Bigfoot researchers on the internet. So one day over at his house, he got to showing me some stuff. The BFRO was in its infancy then, and he said, "Man, you need to write up some of the sightings that you've had. You need to write some reports." So I did. I wrote up a couple, 3 of them, and talked to some of them, and talked to one of their experts, and I was sort of let down because I thought I'd learned something from them, but no, they were asking me a bunch of stuff. I expressed interest in learning more from them. They didn't seem too open. Later on, I heard about, from my friend, another Bigfoot research organization. I posted one of my sightings on their website. They contacted me, and lo and behold, this guy from Mississippi called me up one day, and it turned out to be the guy who is now my friend, Bear. And that's how he was introduced me. He said, "Hi, I'm Bear." Well, I'd known a few folks named Bear over the years. I was talking to him. I said, "Man, here's somebody that's just as bad a redneck as I am," because he sounded just about like me. Anyway, I talked to him a little bit. Talking to him was quite a bit different. I realized that he actually, knew something about him. We talked enough times over the phone about different things that I thought, I might actually be interested in going out in the field with this guy. He's pretty sharp. I'd like to see what he knows. And as it turned out, we had an opportunity where we could both go on an investigation on this lady's uncle's farm where they'd had some activity. So we went over there, and that was the first time that I ever was in the field with him. It didn't take me very long to figure out that he knew boogers. We hit it right off, and he and I have been running together ever since then. And that was back in around 1999-2000 time frame. Backing up somewhat, during my time with the government, I started out working in the nuclear business, working on nuclear power and propulsion equipment. We're talking about nuclear power plants and nuclear-powered ships and submarines and such. I was traveling around to the locations of a lot of nuclear power plants, as well as going to some places where we were doing some research on safety-related equipment that's used in nuclear plants. In '83, the commercial nuclear business in this country sort of went down the drain due to the 3 Mile Island accident. Things were sort of drying up there, so I had an opportunity to get more into the military side of the house. And while there, working on a lot of military projects, I became aware that NASA was doing some hiring. A bunch of the old engineers that had brought NASA through the Apollo days and stuff, the ones that hadn't already retired, were retiring, and NASA was hiring big time back then in the early 80s. I had always been interested in the space program. I went and interviewed, and lo and behold, they hired me. That started a whole other round of traveling, going around different parts of the country. They sent me back to school. I had to get a bunch of engineering certifications that they wanted me to have. So we were constantly going around to different places where there were various experiments and things like that being built that went on the shuttle. I worked in the Integration Operations and Test Requirements branch. We were the guys that worked with people that were wanting to fly experiments on the shuttle, and we worked with them to help them build it where it was flight-worthy, and then we tested it, and we figured out how we were going to integrate it and install it on the shuttle. And we worked with the astronauts, training them how to run the dadgum experiments. So I was traveling a lot. In my free time, I was out Bigfooting when I could, if I wasn't in the middle of some big city somewhere. Even if I was in a big city, on the weekends, I was gone to the boonies. That went on all through the 80s and into the 90s. After the Challenger accident, I worked 7 different missions in mission control, and I was in mission control when the Challenger blew up. After the Challenger blew up, there wasn't a whole lot of work going on with NASA, but there was a tremendous amount of stuff going on with the Army Missile Command. So I just went over into the Missile Command side of the house and kept right on working, and that led into traveling a bunch, even more so than when I was with NASA. So again, I spent a lot of time out Bigfooting while I was off on TDY in my free time. I know that's too long of an intro, but that's sort of the way I got into it, sort of the history of what brought me up to around the time of 1999-2000, where I started doing this with groups of people. I don't know if you call them clubs or whatever, but in sort of public organizations. But I sat down one day and I got to looking at it, where I have made, over the years, and this is counting up to now, I have made dedicated trips just for Bigfoot research and investigations to 18 different states. The sole purpose I was there was just for that. I have been in that many more states, about 18 more states, on other business, and then while there, was able to take the time to go out doing Bigfoot research. So we're talking around 36 states that I have done research in, and 1 Canadian province in Ontario. That's not counting others that I have just driven through, sort of keeping my eyes and ears peeled. But I'm talking about actually been on the ground researching in 36 states and 1 Canadian province. Probably at one time, I may have been the most well-traveled Bigfoot researcher in the United States. Since then, the guys that do a lot of these TV shows and stuff, they've covered a whole lot more ground than I have. But they haven't been doing it as long as I have. I've been around.
I've got to tell you, Kumbo, if my life depended upon seeing a Bigfoot, if I had to pick one or two guys to go out with to accomplish that, you and Bear, without a doubt, would be the guys that I would look up, because in my opinion, it doesn't get any better than you guys. You've been doing it so long with such good results that it's just hard to argue with that. You probably knew this, but I wanted to share this with you just in case you didn't. Did you know that it's because of you and Bear that I got into the whole Dogman research thing in the first place?
No, I didn't know that at all.
It's because of Bear that I got into podcasting, but it's because of both you and Bear that I got into this Dogman thing to start with.
I'm honored and humbled.
Well, you've inspired a lot of people, a lot more people than you'll ever know. I've been talking to people that have mentioned you, I don't know how many times.
Well, I try to tell it like it is, and I don't claim to know everything. I've just been around enough, and I've kept my eyes and ears open enough. I feel blessed that I had a father that taught me at a young age, and my mother also encouraged me as well to, really pay attention to nature, pay attention to what's going on around you, and my grandfather too. I had a really good foundation in the wild, and I was able to apply that towards something, learning more about something that was, complete mystery to me through a large part of my life. And by no means do I know everything about them. No way. It seems like a lot of times the more I learn, the more questions I have. It leaves me totally scratching my head that I can't figure out. And this Dogman thing is one of them. I had heard a little bit of rumbling about them, and I got involved in an incident where I really firsthand heard about the Dogmen from somebody who had actually seen one. That really has turned me on wanting to learn more about them, and they continue to be an enigma to me. And I have never seen one. I'll say that up front. Not sure that I want to see one up close.
Yeah, I can't say I blame you there. Kunbo, I've got to ask you, for the longest time, you didn't even believe in dogmen, or as I think you call them, dog-faced boogers. What made you change your mind on that?
Well, actually, I called them more like werewolves. I think it was Bear that called them. I think Bear might have been the one that called them dog-faced boogers, but I had heard them referred to as werewolves. Well, I thought it was a bunch of hooey, that it was just old wives' tales or something, the Loot Guru and all that. I just didn't really believe it. And as many hours and as much time as I had spent in the woods, I'd never seen one. I'd never run across anything that made me think one was out there. I had never seen any tracks that were unusual, from other Bigfoot tracks, things, something that I couldn't identify. I just didn't believe it.
I'm sure you know about all the reports out there of canine-type dogmen with the backwards-looking legs. What's your take on that?
I have seen tracks of dogmen on multiple occasions. And I have seen the tracks when I was able to talk to the people who saw the Dogman. And I know enough about anatomy of different things to understand how people talk about the backward legs. They're not backwards. They're still made sort of like ours, but I think the difference is whether they're plantigrade or digitigrade or something. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. The plantigrade is more like what we have. In other words, we walk with our heels on the ground. The digitigrade is you walk with your heels off the ground. The tracks that I have seen that I know were Dogman tracks were all digitigrade. You could see the ball of the foot, behind the toes. You could see the toe prints, and you could see claw marks. The first time I saw those was when I was taken to where ladies had had a sighting of one that morning. They took me there and showed me where it was, and I found the tracks. I found where the tracks went up the side of a bank. They didn't see it do that. They didn't hoax it or anything because they didn't see it make those tracks. Where it was across the road is where I found these. But it was in the direction of the line of travel that the ladies said that it was going. They had seen it come up on the east side of the road, and it stopped as they went by. So I just went across after investigating there where they saw it stop, and I looked back down the hill. I could tell where something had come through the grass. Well, I just naturally went to the other side of the road and started looking, and I found where it had scaled the bank. That was the first time that I ever saw the tracks. I can give you more detail on that sighting later on in the interview. But later on at Land Between the Lakes, I found digitigrade tracks with claw marks on the toes. Now, there may be some out there that walk plantigrade. I don't know. But I can tell you this. Look at a dog. My German Shepherd just got up and he's walking over here to me. All right. Dogs, their back legs are digitigrade. Now, as you come up from their pad, their leg goes backwards. And what looks like a backwards knee joint isn't. It's the equivalent of our ankle. And then it breaks back forward. Then their knee is up higher against their side. It's not down below them like it is on our body. So these dog men that walk digitigrade, they do not have backwards breaking knees. They have knees just like you and I, but their heel is up off the ground. And their foot may be elongated to the point that people that see one, that's going to be striking to them. That's going to stick in their mind, and they're going to think that they're seeing a backwards bent knee. That's my take on that. Now, whether there are some that walk with their heels on the ground, I don't know. I haven't seen one. I haven't investigated any reports where they mentioned that, and I was able to find the plantigrade track. I have never investigated a report where they specifically said that it walked. I mean, that's one thing I question people about. Could you see its feet? Did it have normal-looking feet? Was its heel on the ground? You know, did it leave normal-looking tracks? And I've never had anybody answer yes to any of that. And nor have I found tracks where they said they had seen one and they were normal-looking, what you think of normal Bigfoot tracks, if there's any such thing as normal Bigfoot tracks.
Do you ever go out and specifically look for dogmen in the woods?
Yes. Yes, I have made multiple trips to Land Between the Lakes, to areas within the Land Between the Lakes where there have been dogman incidents, up to and including people being killed. And I have found tracks in one of those locations. As a matter of fact, it was quite unnerving. We camped there, believe it or not, and we had a guy that saw what he thought at the time was a regular Bigfoot easing around the edge of our camp. And he saw it pass behind Bear's tent and then come over and go behind a tree that was right next to my tent. I'm talking about within a couple of feet. Another one of my German Shepherds was in the tent with me. I spoil my dogs. I sleep on a cot in my tent, and I have a pet cot for my dog that I take with me. It's about 4 feet long and about 2.5, almost 3 feet wide, and it sits up on legs, and it's about 3-4 inches up off the ground. Gets him off the cold ground. They love them. I've got 3 or 4 of them around the house here, and they love the things. And I'll put a folded up blanket on it, and that's where they sleep when we go camping. And anyway, so he was on his pet cot. Well, I was there sound asleep, and I woke up to my dog Buddy growling. Anybody that's owned a large dog or owned dogs for very long, you know there's two kinds of growls. There's an aggressive growl and a defensive growl. Actually, what woke me up was Buddy had gotten up off his cot and he was getting under my cot and bumping me from below, trying to wad up under my cot, and he was growling. I rolled over, I got a hold of him, I drug him out from under my cot, put him back on his cot, told him to stay. He wouldn't do it. He got back under my cot, and he was shivering, and he was growling. And I thought, well, maybe there's something out there. So I'll just cut him some slack, let him stay there. Well, that's where he ended up staying all night. The next day, the guy that had seen this creature, he didn't see it well enough. You know, he was out, I think he'd gotten up to relieve himself or something. He said he saw just a dark shadow, you know, just a dark shape that moved down, and it passed behind Bear's tent and went over beside my tent and stood there behind a pretty good size, about a 2.5 foot diameter tree that was beside my tent. And he said he didn't see it after that. That he didn't know if it had sneaked away around behind my tent or if it was still hiding there, but eventually he went back in his tent and went back to sleep. All right. He was talking about it the next day, and he was telling Bear about it, and I was busy with doing other things. I wasn't paying attention. I'm like, yeah, because this guy has been known to, I thought, exaggerate a little bit. Well, later that day, I was getting ready to take my tent down and, you know, pack up to head home. And I walked around there, and lo and behold, there were tracks. Very, very clear tracks right behind that tree where he said the thing was, right within 18 inches to 2 feet of the side of my tent. So I went back and I asked, I said, when did you see this? He says, oh, it was about 3:15 this morning. And I remember I had looked at my watch when Buddy was crawling under my cot, and it was about 3:15.
Ooh.
Yeah. The tracks are very clear. It was behind the tree there for a while. I saw multiple tracks there where it had shifted around a little bit there, and then the tracks headed up the hill behind my tent, headed off sort of to the west-northwest, and disappeared up over a little ridge back behind our camp. And then we got to look at, and Bear and them had found some tracks over behind their tent. People say that they're bloodthirsty, they want to kill you. Well, you can't say that about all of them, or maybe there was enough people in that camp that it wouldn't have done that if it had had ill intent. But I can tell you this, I ain't camping in, I'm not camping in Dogman territory unless there's at least 6 or 7 of us. I've been in that area by myself multiple times in daylight hours, and I can tell you it is some more kind of spooky in there. One time we were passing through the area, and I decided to cut through the land between the lakes, and I hadn't told my wife anything about any particular part of the LBL or anything had happened. She hadn't heard any of the stories about the beast of LBL. She's never heard us me talk about a dog man or anything like that. She was going in there totally blind. We came in to the southern part of the LBL and went up by the old iron furnace that's right there on the trace, which is the main drag north, well, it's not really north and south, it's sort of southeast to northwest through the LBL, but we stopped by the old iron furnace that's right there on the trace, and we went by the buffalo field and got to see the buffaloes, and I drove her around, showed her one of the old homes that are still back there in the woods that nobody lives in anymore. We went up by the elk enclosure and saw that. Rode through there and got to see a lot of elk and everything, so we headed on up north. Went to an overlook up near the canal that connects Barkley Lake with Kentucky Lake, that connects the Cumberland River and the Tennessee River together. And we circled back around to the southwest and started down the west side there along one of the roads that follows the shoreline of Kentucky Lake there. And she started getting a little bit creepy. We came to this one place, had a beautiful view, and I couldn't get her to get out of the car. And it was broad daylight. And she said, I don't like this place. This place got a bad feeling to it. Well, we were still pretty good distance away, you know, a few miles away from where the really bad dogman stuff had happened. So I wanted to cut from there, cut cross country back towards the trace, and I wanted to go back by the place that was referred to as the bunkers, where a dogman was supposedly killed after the incident that happened where the 4 people got killed that were, you know, camping in the RV park, you know, in their RV. So we head out down that road, and she started getting spooked. And I hadn't said a word. And I came up to the side road that turns off that went up to where the bunkers were. And I wanted to go up in there to see them. She wouldn't go. I said, would you mind sitting here in the car and if I go? She said, you better not get out of sight of this car. And she said, don't you leave me down here. She said, this place is bad. She'd never been to a place where she felt like that before. She was totally spooked, and I hadn't said a word about anything. I mean, she had no idea of the history of the place. So we ended up, I didn't get out, didn't go anywhere, and I tried to drive through a couple of areas, and she told me, she said, just get me out of here. I don't want to see any more. I want to get out of here. I don't like this place. So we left and headed on out, you know, across the canal and up through Grand Rivers and, you know, headed on home. But I was really astounded at her reaction to the place from somebody that was totally and completely oblivious to what had happened up there. So it's got a feel to it that people that don't even know what's going on can pick up on if they're perceptive at all. And I was happy. It was a beautiful day. Clear as a bell, sun was shining. I mean, it was a gorgeous day. And I think it was in the fall, in the early fall. It was just, I mean, it was one of those days just good to be alive, good to be out and around, you know. She didn't like that north end of the LBL at all.
The LBL is a very creepy place. There's just something about that place that isn't right. I've got no desire to go hang out there. Before we move on with the topic of the LBL, I want to ask you, Kumbo, between dogmen and Bigfoot, or boogers as you call them, which one scares you the most?
Well, let me back up. You had asked me had I been specifically out to investigate dogmen sightings. I've been multiple times to LBL doing it. One time I was going on a trip out west, and I made a specific trip to Lake Oologah area there north of Tulsa, Oklahoma, to investigate some dogman sightings there. And I went out one time to an area there. As it turned out, they didn't tell me that there were dogmen out there, but we went out to an area out near Hitchcock, Oklahoma. You can go to Hitchcock all you want to and wander around. You'll never find this place. That was just the nearest civilization. But I met the people in Hitchcock, and we went out to a place that was way out in a ranch that their family owned, way out in the sticks, and I couldn't find the place again now if my life depended on it. I'm usually really good with directions, but I could not find this place again. And I don't even know how to find it on a topo map. I mean, I don't know. I was taken out there after dark, and after we got out there, it was revealed to me that there was a whole family of werewolves that lived out there. And we actually camped out there. Yeah. And I never saw or heard a thing. Killed 2 rattlesnakes, and that was it. Never saw or heard a thing. And Bo never alerted. Bo was with me on that trip, and he never alerted, so I don't know. So I've made 3 trips, 2 that I knew ahead of time were to investigate, or I've made multiple trips to Land Between the Lakes, but I've been to 3 different locations, 2 knowing ahead of time that, you know, we were specifically going there looking for dogmen, and this other one, I got there and found out that that's what we were looking for, or what they call werewolves. But I'm sorry for interrupting. Now let's go on to the next question that you had started asking.
Between dogmen and Bigfoot, or boogers as you call them, which one are you more afraid of?
Dog men, absolutely positively.
Why is that?
Well, I guess historically, you hear about a lot more stories of people disappearing or being killed, and it is suspected that regular Bigfoot, either type 1 or type 2, had something to do with it. But you hear less stories of killings or disappearances or whatever that are attributed to the dogmen. But the things that you do hear about the dogmen and the people that have had up-close encounters with them, they all have been way more traumatized by them than the average person that I've seen that have had up-close encounters with Bigfoot. Now, I'm not saying that there are not people that are extremely traumatized by encounters with Bigfoot, but the percentage of people that are traumatized by encounters that they've had with dogmen is a lot higher than the percentage of people that have had close-up encounters with Bigfoot. It seems to have a much stronger effect on people. Now, and I don't know if that's just because of conditioning from the time we're little, seeing werewolf movies and such as that, but I know it evokes a much stronger gut reaction in me, personally. I have a picture of one that a fellow researcher took, and it's a really, really good picture. I mean, so good you can see the pupils in its eyes. And no, I am not going to make it public. I've shared it with a few people over the years. You can see the pupils of his eyes. You can see its teeth. You can see its nostrils. You can see the wrinkles in its nose. I cannot look at it without shivers running up and down my back and getting goosebumps all over me. It's just like looking into the face of evil when I look at it. But it was just standing there when the guy got his picture. It was accidental. He didn't know it was there. They were exploring up a creek bottom, and they got to a point that they began to feel just overwhelming dread. And he said it got to the point that he could not make his feet go any further. He could not pick his feet up and put them down to go further up that creek. It was that bad. So he picked up his camera, and this is back in the days of film cameras. He had a good film camera, and he just focused it about 50, 60 feet ahead of him and just started panning and clicking pictures. And then he changed his focus a little bit deeper and then panned back, taking pictures. He sent us a few of these pictures and pointed out where he wanted us to look in the pictures for something that he thought might have been a booger standing there. Well, we looked where he told us, but then we pulled the whole picture up on the screen and got to looking at it, and all of a sudden, boom, there this thing was. It was over on the opposite side from where he was wanting us to look. And it's just standing there. It's just standing there looking at you. And it obviously didn't attack them, but they were totally creeped out. They knew something was there. But to look in his eyes, I'll tell you what, any person that can look at that picture and not get the shivers and the chills does not have a soul. I'll tell you that. If you've got any soul in you at all and you look at that picture, you're going to get the willies. But they scare me a lot more than the regular Bigfoot.
You know, I have yet to run across anyone who didn't say the dogmen were scarier to them than a Bigfoot would be. Bouncing back to the whole LBL topic, you had a law enforcement officer based in that park warn you not to camp out in the northern part of that park. Could you tell us about that?
This is the first time I became aware that something had happened in that park. I was an assistant scoutmaster for years, and I worked with a couple of different troops, and this one troop I had worked with at the time, we were planning on a camping trip to LBL, and over the years, troops that I had been involved with and been a member of as a scout had camped in the land between the lakes a number of times. But I had not been in the LBL in years. So, a guy that I knew that was a law enforcement officer for the Park Service, and he had been at another national park, and I had heard that he had, a couple of years before, 2 or 3 years before, that he had transferred to the Land Between the Lakes. And this is a guy who, we grew up in the same church together. He had graduated from high school ahead of me, but we had attended the same high school. So I contacted him and told him that, we were planning on bringing our troop up there to the LBL to go camping, and was asking if he could recommend a good place for us, that would be fun. They have a lot of stuff for the guys to do. He told me, what kind of, you want to do wilderness camping? You want, some, little cabins or, little primitive cabins? What are you interested in? And so I told him we were interested in, in tent camping and such. And he said, well, if you remember, you can go anywhere you want to go. All you got to do is just check in at the gate when you come in there. But you guys don't need to be doing a bunch of backcountry hiking or camping anywhere north of the elk enclosure. Well, why? Well, there's been some stuff going on up there that, I'm not at liberty to tell you about right now, but I'd suggest, several other places. Well, he told me this, one particular place, and we thought, oh, okay, well, I said, that looks good. I had an old LBL map, and I found it on the map. So we showed up there, and he actually came by the camp one evening, and we were sitting around the campfire and talking and everything, and most of the guys were gone off somewhere, and I think the other adult leader was somewhere, and I said, so how come you don't want to, what happened, what's going on north of the elk enclosure, how come you don't want us camping up there, or, doing a bunch of backcountry hiking up there? He looked around, and he says, well, he said, I got involved in the investigation of a guy that got killed up there. I said, really? And he said, yeah. And I said, what happened? He walked up on pot growers or something? He said, no. He said, this guy was killed by an animal of some kind. And I said, really? He said, yeah, absolutely. And so I said, tell me about it. So he told me, and he related as how this guy had come up there and he was bow hunting. He had camped, and there was a side road that went off the trace back to the east, and there were some green fields down this road. And he was bow hunting around there, and it was, it was bow season, so it was early fall. Well, he was going to be in there 2 or 3 days and then come home. Well, he didn't come home when he said he was going to, so his wife had called up and said that her husband gone up there bow hunting, and he was supposed to be home the day before and hadn't shown up. She said that it didn't surprise her when he wasn't home by, 10, 11, 12 o'clock, but she said that when he wasn't there by the next morning, she figured something was going on. So well, what kind of vehicle is he in? She described it. So my friend said that they came in there that morning when he was coming on duty and reported this phone call, and a couple of them said, oh, well, yeah, I've seen that truck. He's parked up there, at this particular road and yada yada. And then we'll go up there and see what you can find, see if you can find him and see what's going on. So they took off up there. Sure enough, they found his vehicle, right tag number and everything. And of course, when you go in there, you have to, I think you fill out a little thing, a piece of paper, and you leave it on your dashboard, if I remember right. Anyway, they positively identified it, that it was the guy's vehicle. My friend didn't tell me this, but I have heard since that the windows were busted out in the vehicle. But my friend didn't tell me that. I've heard that from another source since then. But anyway, they go in there and they go into the camp, and the campsite's torn up. Now, I mean, tent torn to shreds, stuff slung around everywhere, and no sign of the guy. They look around, can't find anything. They bring tracking dogs in and start tracking him. And the dogs are going to the, more or less to the eastward, I think, like east-northeast is the direction they're going. After they've gone a distance, they find a piece of his clothing up in a tree. They find various pieces of his clothing strewn around various places, several of them up in trees, which is unusual. They eventually found his body, very mutilated, laying in a field. I don't know if it was a green field, but it was an opening in the forest of some kind. Of course, he didn't take me there. He did take me, though, and showed me the next day where the guy was camped. Then he got to telling me stories about these werewolf creatures. That's what he called them. These werewolves that lived up in there, supposedly. That was the first time that I ever heard of the other killings that had happened up there that are pretty famous. There's been a lot written about them, where there was a family of 4 that was killed. And he was not there when that happened. That would happen some years before he was working there. Now, he told me that once they found the guy's body and the way it was mutilated, he said there were all kind of government people there from different agencies and stuff. And he said that park police were basically there just to sort of control traffic, and that there were just gobs of other people that showed up there. And I said, well, what kind? He said there were some military-looking people. He said there were people that I figured might have been FBI, something else. He said there were, this is before the Men in Black movie, but he said there were secret squirrels that showed up. He said it wasn't just 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. He said there were dozens that came in there. And that basically the park personnel, they were just trying to control traffic and keep them supplied with what they needed to stay in the field, to help them out. But that they were definitely in a subordinate role at that time. Once they found the body, the control of the situation was snatched away from them. Now, some years later, I ran into a person who lives up in that area and still lives in that area. And he actually met with us while we were up there on one of our outings. And the talk came around to some of the incidents that had happened there. And he started talking about the bow hunter that was killed. We started asking him questions and stuff. And I was astounded, absolutely amazed how what he was telling, how it matched what my friend had told me years earlier. More than a decade earlier. I'm talking about actually close to 15 years earlier. That, what my friend had told me. He seemed so intimately familiar with it. I said, do you know where this happened? Do you know where the guy was camped? Could you show us where the campsite was? Well, yeah. Bear and I absolutely didn't tell this guy that I knew where the campsite was, that I'd been there 15 years before. So off we went. And I was absolutely astounded. He took us to the right place. The road there now still goes down to the green fields, but then where it goes on further to the east, over into the area where the guy's body was found, it's not maintained anymore, and it's all washed out now. And he said, boy, at the time, you wouldn't believe this road was worn down slick. There was so many vehicles in and out of here. He said, it was unbelievable, the people that came in here. And I said, well, what kind of people? He said, man, it was alphabet soup. He said, you know, any agency that goes after weird things, he said, they were here. But the details of what they knew meshed almost perfectly. So I'm totally convinced that story is true because of from 2 completely different sources that didn't know each other, that still don't know each other. And we're looking at this thing from 2 totally different points of view. Now, what he told me about the original killings that I wouldn't say the original ones, but the more famous ones of where the family of 4 were killed up in the old RV park. He told me a fair amount about that, but again, none of that information was first-hand information because he was not there when it happened. everything he knew about it was what he had heard from his coworkers that were there and from other people that he had talked to that were natives of the area. And he knew quite a bit about it. And a lot of what he told me meshed pretty good with what, and I think the lady, I can't remember what her name was right off the top of my head. I'm not going to say it because I can't remember for sure what her name is, but there's a pretty famous narrative of what went on during this incident. Doesn't take too many Google searches to find it, and it's, you just search under the Beast of LBL and you'll come across it. But what my friend told me meshes pretty good with what that lady wrote. Now, I'll tell you one thing. There's a lot of people talk about an area they call the bunkers. And there are pictures of the bunkers on the internet. And I can tell you 100% for sure that those are not the correct bunkers. The concrete structures that are out in the woods that people say are bunkers are not. I think they're old safe rooms that were left over from houses. They're old root cellar rooms. I know for sure there's one of them out there that has a cistern in it. There's been pictures of it on the internet calling it a bunker. I was taken to the real bunkers, and there are some stories out there that the bunkers were built after that incident where the family of 4 got killed. That's not true. My friend doesn't believe that, and I don't believe it. He showed them to me, and I think those bunkers were already there, and I think they were probably built as part of some training exercise for maybe a National Guard unit or something that went on out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky or something. But there were bunkers there, and if I remember right, there were either 5 or 6 of them, and they were arranged where they had overlapping fields of fire. And they looked like old World War I or World War II pillboxes. They were set down on the ground, and only about 1.5 feet, 2 feet of them stuck up above ground, and they had horizontal gun ports in them. There were steps going down into them, and at one time they had very heavy steel doors on them. I actually saw the things. When my friend took me up there, they were still there. And they were not where the structures are that people call the bunkers nowadays. I have been back to that place multiple times. I was taken there one time by my friend. I went back later on my own, by myself, and I looked at them, and my conclusion is, based on the way they were arranged and everything, that they were arranged in a defensive position. The fronts of them, the gun ports, were pretty much all facing in the same direction. That's why I think they were built there as the training grounds or something. And it's not unusual to find military training facilities on public government properties. I can take you to a national forest in a southern state that has absolutely unbelievable training facilities, and even an area where armored vehicles can have live firing exercises, and it's all on national forest public land. So anybody that says, oh, you wouldn't have something like that on Land BL, they don't know what they're talking about. Now, they haven't been around near the government installations that I have. I earned my living on government installations for years, and you would be astounded what's out there. But anyway, back to the story. Another reason I don't think that these bunkers were built after the family of 4 was killed is because if this creature is as smart as I think it is, and as smart as people say that it is, there's no way that you could lure that thing into that area there, coming at it from the correct direction, that it could be exposed to, multiple firing points like that. It was too small of an area. And I don't think there's any way that you could have driven it into that area, that you could have chased it in there. I just don't believe it. I think that those bunkers were there for another purpose. Now, the third time I ever went there, they had been in there destroying the bunkers, tearing them out. And I don't think there's any kind of clandestine reason for it. I think it was probably just purely coincidental. maybe they didn't want people playing in them or something, or maybe they're, I know that snakes would tend to want a den in them. Maybe they were afraid of, somebody getting snake bit, because there's certainly a lot of poisonous snakes in the area. But the last time I went in there, in the area was gated off. There were gates across the roads where you used to be able to drive right up there nearly all the way to them. Now there's a gate across the road, and you have to get out and you have to walk about 150, 200 yards to get in there. But they've all been busted up. All the concrete's been removed. Unless you knew what was there, you wouldn't know what had been there. There's old house debris, and old foundation debris and stuff all over land between the lakes. So there's nothing there that would make you think that anything special was ever there. And I don't think it was anything special. But the area's pretty much been cleaned out. You might call it sanitized, but I don't think there was any reason to sanitize that area. But those were the real bunkers that I got to see back then. And what's there now are not the real bunkers. And I don't think the bunkers had any pivotal role to play in all of that Beast of LBL business at all anyway. So
that family of four incident supposedly involved a family that was camping in an RV, if I remember correctly, in the LBL. Something supposedly had killed that family. The 3 family members were found inside that camper, if memory serves, but the daughter was found a distance from that RV in a tree. And the remains that were found were pretty grisly. It looked like a wild animal had attacked that family and ripped them apart. Now, as far as that family of 4 incident compared to the bow hunter incident goes, I do believe wholeheartedly in that bow hunter incident. I heard about that some time ago, and I have yet to hear anything about that incident that makes me skeptical about its authenticity. But I can't say the same thing about that family of 4 incident, and I'll tell you why. As the story was told, supposedly 2 police officers that were on scene for that investigation. Those 2 police officers, when the feds and other law enforcement agents that superseded them arrived, those 2 police officers were told to leave the scene. If you believe the story, those 2 police officers drove some distance away from that crime scene and decided to stop at a gas station and talk to the woman who wrote about that incident and brought that incident to public knowledge. Where I find somewhat of a fault with this whole story is it's awfully hard to believe that these 2 police officers, after having been sworn to silence by the feds before being allowed to leave that area, it's awfully hard for me to believe that they would have gone and told what they had seen and witnessed to the very first person that they came across after leaving the scene of that crime, if it really did happen. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but when you consider that fact, it's hard to believe. If one part of it seems like it might not be true, for me it's kind of hard to believe that the whole story is true. I could be wrong, but that's just how I see it.
Well, like I said, my friend got his information about it second and third hand and got on knows how many hands. My information I got out of it has been through even more hands. But now reading the story, I've read the story multiple times. And the lady that wrote the story worked in a local grocery store. I think it was an IGA. And supposedly the investigation had been going on for a while. I don't think days and days, but there had been officers there at the crime scene for quite a while. The guys were either sent away or relieved or whatever. And if I remember the story correctly, as it's written, and this can be verified by looking online, that they stopped by the IGA to get something to eat. And I don't know if they had a snack bar in there or a little deli in there or whatever, but they stopped by the IGA and they were sort of just taking a rest, and they were sitting outside the store. Both of them were in mild shock. They were talking amongst themselves, and they were very shaken up. And this woman worked there, and she knew everybody in the area. And she was coming or going, out of the store and saw them outside there, and they were obviously visibly shaken up. She asked them what was going on. They sort of got to shaking their heads, and in all our years of law enforcement, we've never seen anything this grisly. We've never seen anything like this before. Well, what? I don't know if they didn't tell her then, or I can't remember enough details of the story to tell you this, but you can look it up and read it yourself, or anybody can that's listening to this. Doesn't take much research at all to find it. But eventually the story came out, what had happened. And like you said, the mother was found, if I remember correctly, in the bathroom. The husband, I think he was found right outside, either at the front end or the back end of the RV, and he had a shotgun with him. And it looked like he had gone out to try to confront this thing, and it attacked and killed him outside the RV. There was a boy and a girl, and one of the children was found inside. They were torn to shreds. They were inside the RV, same as the wife was, and the wife and mother. And you are correct, Vic, that the story goes that the other child, and I don't remember if it was the boy or the girl, was up in a tree. They were just horribly mutilated. But there's been a lot of time that's passed since that's happened. Now, I can tell you this. You can still see on old maps where the RV campground was. You can still find the road that goes back in there. I've walked that road. You can still walk back in there, and you can still see the pads where the RVs park. But that RV camping area is closed. It does not exist anymore. And so it is a fact that there was an RV campground there. And it is a fact that it was closed. Now, whether that was a reason or not, there's room for dispute there. I mean, I can show it to you on a map real quick where it is, or where it was.
Yeah, there just might be something to that. Where there's smoke, there's fire in a lot of cases, so maybe there is something to that.
Now, the area that people called the original bunker area, and the reason I think it got drug into all of this was because it was less than a half a mile away to the west from that old RV park, and from where the people were supposedly killed. So it's easy to see why the story was aggrandized and embellished, and why this bunker story got drug into it that you hear about. But I personally think that's bunk, that had absolutely nothing to do with it. If the incident happened as my friend heard about it, and as it's been written about it, and other people have talked about it, then there was an effort made to eradicate either the one that did it or a bunch of them. I don't know. Who knows? I don't think anybody knows that, at least that'll talk about it. Like I said, I have no idea if they tried to hunt down what they thought was one particular individual or if it was a group of them. But if it happened, they were unsuccessful in wiping out all the dogmen because, it was supposedly a dogman that killed the bow hunter.
Oh, yeah, they're still there. There's no doubt about that.
I saw dogman tracks, here just a few years ago. So there's still dogmen in north part of LBL. So I can tell you that for sure. Now, I believe that there are still dogmen in the land between the lakes, certainly in the northern part. I have been out multiple times during daylight hours and at night looking for these things, and there are enough differences in the way they conduct themselves. They don't respond to calls like regular Bigfoot do. They do not reveal themselves as openly sometimes as other Bigfoot do. I have not laid my eyeballs on one. And, I have been blessed with seeing quite a number of type 1 and type 2 Bigfoot, the patty type as well as the southern swamp ape type that we call the type 2. I've seen both kinds. on multiple occasions. But I've never laid my eyes on a Type 3 or a Dogman. I don't want to see one up close. I've had one close to me, but I didn't know it was there. I knew something was there. I just didn't know what it was. It was when I found its tracks the next day that I knew what it was. But I have not laid my eyeballs on one, and I'm not so sure how I would react if I saw one up close. But the consistent thing that I have found in researching them and talking to eyewitnesses is the descriptions are pretty dadgum close. In fact, descriptions are more consistent than they are with regular Bigfoot. And this is over a wide area of the country. I've talked to eyewitnesses in Kentucky, Tennessee, Oklahoma, and Alabama. Well, actually, I've talked to one in Arizona as well. And the descriptions are very consistent.
Let's focus on some of these investigations you've done that you just mentioned right there. Would you mind telling us about the encounter that those two deer hunters had?
Actually, that's not my first one. The first one that I had was one that I came across as a result. The deer hunter incident I came across as a result of investigating another one. When I was working for NASA, we had a project going where there was a company in Union Springs, Alabama that had a contract to build a bunch of new communication equipment for NASA that was going into Marshall Space Flight Center. It was a new PBX system that was going into Marshall's facilities, and it was going to allow us to tie a bunch of phones together into, gigantic conference calls, and it was a pretty complicated piece of equipment for, 1980s technology. This is in 1984. Union Springs didn't have a motel or anything, so I was staying down in Troy, Alabama, and driving up to Union Springs every day. They had a bunch of very highly skilled people that worked for me there, and they were all very good electronics technicians and such, and very sharp people. I was surprised at the caliber of people that were working at this installation. Anyway, we were working 24 hours a day, and I was in charge of the day shift. We worked from 7 to 7. And we were having a handoff meeting that morning, talking to the night shift guys as they were going off. And there were two ladies that worked for me that were also from Troy, then they rode to work together. They had shown up just a little bit later than usual, and they were obviously very upset. And I could tell that one of them had been crying. I mean, it was very obvious that, her eyes were all red and puffy, and they were both, actually they'd both been crying, but one of them still had, wet tear streaks down her cheeks, and you could tell they were both having a hard time keeping it together. As we're getting the reports from the shift going off, and I'm giving out the work instructions for the day, who's going to be doing what, these ladies were very preoccupied, and they couldn't concentrate on what I was saying, and I knew something was wrong. I figured that they'd either been in a wreck, or somebody close to their family had just died, or they had seen a bad wreck, and something really catastrophic and traumatic had happened to them. So as soon as I got done and everybody started to head out onto the shop floor, I said, hey, come here just a second. So we walked in the office, and I shut the door, and I sat down. I said, y'all have a seat. I said, what's going on? What's the matter? And they looked looking back and forth at each other, and, well, we'd rather not say. And I said, look, I can't have you out on the floor working on this kind of equipment in the shape that you're in. Do you need to go home and need to take care of some personal business? Well, no. And I said, well, look, you can tell me anything. Anything you tell me is not going to surprise me. And anything you tell me, I'll hold in 100% confidence, and it will not go outside this room unless, without your permission. And nothing you can tell me is gonna, blow me out of the water or jeopardize your job unless you tell me that you've been selling plants to the Russians or something, you know. And that got a little bit of a grin out of them, and they said, well, you're not going to believe it. We saw a werewolf on the way to work this morning. I said, you did, really? And, yeah. And so I revealed to them, you know, that I believed in Bigfoot and that I'd heard people talk about werewolves and invested a lot of time in investigating Bigfoot. That opened them up a lot more. They were willing to talk about it. And they said that they were coming to work, and they were a few miles outside of Troy, Alabama, going to the northeast on U.S. Highway 29, and there's a section along through there where the road's got a lot of curves in it. And they said they had just come out of one curve, a long left-hand curve, and the road straightens out for just a very short distance, and it starts to curve back to the right. There's a creek bottom that's down on the east side, which would be to the right side of the road. And they said that as they came around and as they saw the sign for the next curve, there was a big yellow sign there, you know, with a right-hand curve arrow on it. They said all of a sudden they saw that there was this creature had just stepped up onto the bank, up onto the shoulder of the road where the sign was, right there beside the sign, and stopped. They saw it, and the lady didn't really slam on her brakes or anything like that right at first. Said she took her foot up off the gas. Then she thought it was going to come across the road in front of her, so she did stand on the brakes. They said the thing was looking right at them. And the lady that was in the passenger side said that she made eye contact with it, and the lady that was driving sort of freaked, and she didn't lift her foot up off the brake, so they rolled past it doing probably, it's curvy right there, so she said they weren't doing over 45 to 50 to begin with. As they rolled past it, she said they were probably doing less than 20 miles an hour, like 15 to 20. It was standing there beside that road sign, almost like it was leaning on it. It was so close to it. The lady in the passenger side, she said that they locked eyeballs. That she and the creature locked eyeballs, and she said it was the most evil, malevolent thing that she had ever experienced, and she said she literally felt like the thing was trying to suck her soul out of her body, is the way she described it. It completely, totally unnerved her, and I've got chilly bumps on me just telling the story. She said that she has never, ever been so frightened in her life. She thought it was going to somehow pull her essence out of her body right through the car windows. She said it turned its head and looked at her as she rolled by it, you know, looking directly at her, directly in her eyes. The other lady was looking at it as long as they could, and she said once they got past it, suddenly the lady driving sort of snapped out of it, and she stomped on the gas and took off. Neither one of them looked back. They just wanted to get the hell out of there. And as they got going down the road and they realized what they had seen, they started just getting more and more upset. And by the time they got to work there in Union Springs, both of them were just wrecks. So I told them that they could take off if they wanted to. They could have the day off, whatever it took. If they want to go uptown and get a cup of coffee, it's okay. I told them, I live in Troy, and I'm staying in Troy. I would really love it if you would show me this afternoon when we get off work, you know, where this happened. I'd really like to see it because, you know, there was still enough daylight after we got off work to get down there where they could show me where this happened. And they said they would be glad to show me. In fact, they would love to show me where it happened. They were a lot better after talking about it and finding somebody that, you know, that believed them. So that afternoon, we took off down there, and they took me right to the place. We pulled off the highway there, and I was able to, you know, well, how high is relation to the top of the sign here? You know, where was his head? You know, how high was it? I had a tape measure with me in my truck, and I got it out, and I measured up. The thing was about 9 feet tall. Both of them agreed on it totally, on how tall it was. It was about 9 feet. I asked them a lot of questions about, well, what did it look like? They said that they could tell it had fangs. I said, well, were you seeing the upper fangs or lower fangs, or were they like tusks like on a wild boar or whatever? Well, they decided that after sort of talking it through that they could see uppers and lowers sticking out of its snout. They said it had a dog-like black nose on the end of it. I said, how big was the snout? I said, was it a long snout like a German Shepherd, or was it like a boxer? No. It was not as big as a German Shepherd, not that long. They described it as more baboon-like. And I asked about the fur, and they said it was sort of charcoal gray colored fur all over. The description of the hair on it and everything was very, very similar to the descriptions that you get of Bigfoot. One of the ladies mentioned the reason she said it was almost like it was leaning on the signpost, it had one of its hands wrapped around the signpost. She said that she thought she saw claws on its fingers, but she wasn't sure. And the other lady, the lady that was driving, also said it had its hand on the signpost, but she didn't notice if it had claws or fingernails or what. And I asked, did it have ears? Oh yeah, it had ears. Did it have ears like a person? No, it had like dog's ears. And I said, oh, like a German Shepherd or something? No, not that big. And I said, well, like a lab? No, they didn't hang down, And one of the ladies said, well, it looks sort of like Spock's ears. Spock on Star Trek? I said, oh yeah, I love Star Trek, yeah. Well, sort of like that, sort of like his ears, but longer, bigger. But they were pointed? And she said, yeah. I said, well, we're sort of like a Doberman Pinscher's ears? And both of them, yeah, that's it, like a Doberman Pinscher's ears. And I said, okay. They gave me a pretty good description of the thing. But the lady who was in the passenger seat, she kept talking about his eyes. How his eyes just bored into her. That they just bored right into her soul. Her biggest impression was his eyes. And how evil it looked and how evil it felt to her. The evil presence that she felt from the thing. They didn't want to hang around there very long because it was getting dusky dark by this time. So they left. Well, I started looking around and, I could see while they were there, I could see where something had walked up from the creek bottom. I could see, something had walked through the grass there on the shoulder of the road and come up there by the sign. Since that's the direction they said it was coming, and they said it looked like it was going to cross the road, but it just stopped there by the road sign when their car came around the curve. And that's why the lady had put her foot on the brake to begin with, because she thought it was going to step out in front of her. And I said, did you look in the rearview mirror? Did it go on and cross the road after you passed it? We don't know. We didn't look. I don't know. I don't care. We just wanted out of there. So after they left, I went across the road. There's a very steep dirt bank there. Not a rock bank. It's not blasted through rock. It's cut through dirt, clay deposits, and maybe there's some, little bit of rock in it, but it's mostly just dirt right there. This bank is. Right there, it was 13 feet high. From the bottom of the shoulder to the top of the bank was right at 13 feet. About head high on me, right at 6 feet off the ground. In fact, I measured it. It was 6 feet up. I found a track. And what I found was, I could tell it was the ball of the foot, and there were 5 toes, not 4, there were 5, but they were very distinct claws. And they looked like pretty good sized claws. The claws looked like they were probably a good 1.25 to 1.5 inches long. And on each toe. Oh, I also found at the bottom of the bank where it had kicked off. There was sort of a scuff, but I could tell where its claws had dug into the ground there. And its next foot hit, like I said, was about 6 feet up. I stood back looking up the bank, and this bank was at about, I'd say, guesstimate, at about an angle 10 to 15 degrees off vertical. So from the horizontal, this bank is up at about a 75 to 80 degree angle. Something like that. I'd say somewhere between 70 and 80 degrees. All right, I looked and I could see another track up just below the lip of the bank. So I went around and got up there. By this time, it was beginning to get a little bit dusk on me, so I took a flashlight with me, just in case. I didn't need it. I found where the track was, and I looked at it from the top down, and again, it looked just like the other one, except I could tell it was the opposite foot. And I think the first one was the left foot that I'd found there about head high, and the second one was the right foot, if I remember correctly. And it looked just the same as the first track, 5 toes and, prominent claws. I looked all over the lip of the bank there, the top of the bank there on the hill. I found nothing. I found no further tracks at all. I did find one place where I could tell the grass was mashed down, and I found a broken limb. And it wasn't a broken limb that had been grabbed and twisted. It was just had been incidentally broken as the thing went into the woods there, headed, roughly westward. So I was really, really, really impressed with how it had scaled that bank in 2 steps. That really impressed me. The fact that a 9-foot animal could scale that bank. By the way, back to the description of the animal, I asked them what they think it weighed. Both of them said over 500 pounds.
Ooh.
Yeah. And they described it as very muscled, that you could see the muscles under its hair. They said the muscles were very highly defined. It was very athletically built. Now, they didn't describe the gigantic, humongous shoulders like a lot of people describe on Bigfoot, but they said that it had very highly defined muscles all over it in its arms and legs and chest. Now, when they saw it, it was not totally bright daylight yet. This would have been at about 6:15-ish, something like this, in the morning when they saw it. In fact, the lady said she still had her headlights on. But she said she didn't really need them. She kept them on because they were prone to hit little patches of fog and stuff like that as they were coming to work. But she said right there it was not foggy. I asked if its eyes glowed, and she said no. Both of them said no, its eyes were not glowing. So I was interested in that. Now, this leads back to the story of the deer hunters. I got to doing a lot more investigating there around Troy, and about a mile to 3/4 of a mile cross country to the west of where this sighting was, there was an old abandoned fire tower out there. A lot of the kids and other people used to hang out there at night and build campfires, and they'd build them a bonfire and sit around the bonfire and drink beer and tell stories and such. There were a number of stories that I came across of people who had been out there playing music and stuff like that, and they would get screamed at or roared at or something. They would shine their light around. They see eyes glowing at them real high up off the ground, or they could actually see eyes glowing in the outline of something big. So there'd been a number, and actually some people actually said it was, that it was a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot or something. I came across numbers of reports around that old fire tower. Then I heard one. These guys actually wrote it up later and posted it on somebody's website. This happened on a piece of property that's between the fire tower and where the ladies saw the dog man. If you drew a line on a map from the curve sign where the ladies saw the thing to the old fire tower site and drew a straight line between it, this was about halfway and just very slightly to the south of that line. As best as you could navigate cross country there, it was right between the two sightings. 2 guys were deer hunting on one of them's family's farm. one of the guys had been back in the woods and got the creeps and felt like that something was watching him or stalking him or something, and he had even heard some grumbling and growling. Never did see anything, but it spooked him enough that he came out of the woods and went to the truck and got in the truck and locked himself in and sitting there. The other guy's still in the woods, and he stays till after dark. But about the time he starts to come down, he starts getting the creeps and feeling like something. This is pre-cell phone days now, remember? This is back in the early 1980s. So there was no way for these two guys to communicate at all. And he had no idea that his bud had been back at the truck for several hours waiting on him. So the guy comes down, he's got the heebie-jeebies, and he hears something pacing him through the woods, following him, off beside him. He's walking through the woods or along a woods road or something like that, and he can hear off to his side something following along with him. And then he'd stop, and then he'd hear another step, and then silence. He'd start walking again, then he'd hear steps, he'd stop, and then he'd hear another footfall, and then silence. It got him so scared, and he also heard some grumbling noises as well. He said he even heard some growling that got pretty loud as he was walking. Finally, as he got closer to the truck, and he knew that he could make it to the truck on a run, he busted into a run and ran to the truck. He heard the thing chasing him. And he ran to the truck and piles in the truck, and there's his buddy already in the truck. And as you can imagine, it didn't take very long for him to decide that it's time to get the hell out of Dodge. So they go hauling out of there. He fires the truck up. By the way, he was the owner of the truck. And so he got the truck fired up. They hauled out of there. As they were leaving, they heard the thing start screaming at them. And they heard it over the noise of the truck engine. They go hauling, and this field is pretty wide open. It was just a hay field. And it was pretty smooth, fairly flat, although it is a slight downhill slope. But you could go pretty fast across it, and that guy was flying. They got to a gate. Somebody had to get out and open the gate. Well, one of them jumps out and opens the gate, and they hear the dadgum thing coming. They could hear it getting closer. They jump in the truck and they haul. In the second pasture, they can't go quite as quick. They get to that gate. They knew as fast as they were going and as far as they had gone at a high rate of speed to get to the first gate, as quickly as it was coming up on them, they knew there was no way that they could be very far ahead of it when they got to the second gate, and they didn't even slow down, hardly just ran right through the gate, just busted the gate open with their truck and kept right on going. I talked to one of the guys, and he was just extremely shaken up. It took quite a bit of cajoling to get his other buddy to talk. Now, neither one of them saw the thing well. They just got glimpses of it. But they all described that it was growling like a huge dog, like a huge, mean dog. They both described that when they did get little glimpses of it, they felt like it was something just horrendously evil, and that it intended to get them. They both thought that it would have killed them if it had caught them. But I had to back up, and I'd said, if it had really wanted you dead, you wouldn't have made it out of the woods. Well, it was chasing us, it was going to kill us. I said, well, it wanted you out of there, and it was just making sure that you got out of there, and making sure that there was no mistake that he wanted you out of there. But you never can tell. You don't know what it might have done. But both of them were absolutely terrified by it. And I just thought it was very, very interesting that it had happened probably about 3/8 of a mile or so to the west of where the ladies had seen the dog man.
That area surrounding Troy sounds like a really good area to stay the heck out of to me, I'll tell you what.
Well, Troy there's a lot of boogers around Troy. There's a big creek bottom that comes up into the west part of town, and you've heard people talk about urban Bigfoot. There are regular type 2 Bigfoot that come up into the city limits of Troy on the west side of town on a regular basis. There are a lot of boogers in that area.
That's scary.
But north of town is where you get into the reports of the real belligerent and aggressive ones. And like I said, I know there's at least one dog man out there. So I don't know if all the belligerent and aggressive boogers out north of Troy are dog men, but in 1984 there was one.
Well, I'd say so. That's a day those guys are never going to forget either. That's rough.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I'll tell you what, Coonbo, it's about time to wrap the show up. For the people in the Bigfoot community who over the years have tried to question your claims about having seen all these cryptids, what would you say in response to that?
Well, I just say that you haven't covered the miles that I have. You haven't been to the places that I've been. You haven't spent the thousands and thousands of hours in the woods studying the habitat that they like, figuring out what is the most productive places to work, really learning how to interpret the terrain and the habitat. You haven't been around enough of them to learn how to call them. You just haven't put in the work to be able to have the encounters. I'll have to say this, that I've heard people say this, and at first I didn't know what to think of it. I thought it might have been sort of hooey, but once you've seen one or two, they're easier to spot. And I have to say that I believe that now. Once you're attuned to them, you know what to look for. You notice things out there that other people walk right past and never see. I mean, there's a lot of Bigfoot sign out there, but you learn the kind of sign to look for that's fresh, that is indicative of recent activity. I can show you gobs of sign where boogers made a twist or, done things a year or so ago, but he's not there, or he's done something just passing through. You gotta learn that, number one, that the kind of place to look, and then when you're in those places, you've got to be able to sort through you've got to be able to see the fresh sign and come up with what's going on then. Like right now, I could take you places where we can stomp all over there. I mean, we can look all over there and you won't see a thing. Nothing. Absolutely. You won't see anything, won't hear anything. Come back in 2 months, and I guarantee you that I can show you, you can hear them, might even get lucky and get to see one. I mean, I've had a number of people that have actually had Class A sightings with me. And same thing with bear. They don't stay in the same place all the time, and even within their territory, even within their, the territory that they are presently using, those are big animals. They eat a lot. They can't just sit there in this one place for very long, or they're going to clean it out. They'll totally wipe out everything that's edible. They have a large area, and they have to stay moving within that territory. That's why when we go researching, we listen carefully. We don't go into an area blasting a bunch of calls and stuff. We keep our eyes and our ears open. And then, if we think it's, worthy, then we'll try a call or two and see what happens. You can ask people that have been with us in the field. Sometimes we get really, really lucky and, I open my mouth one time to make a call and then, I don't even get that call made. We've already got a response right there, literally right in our face almost. Other times we go out there, we'll spend a whole night into what we think is good booger territory and that we're pretty sure that they're in and using, and we never turn up a thing. We never see or hear a thing. And it might take us 2 or 3 nights or days in an area to eventually find where the boogers are at that particular time. A lot of this mountainous terrain, if you're on the right side of the mountain or in the right drainage or in the right holler, calls and stuff that they make and knocks and things, you can hear them for miles. And the things that we do, they can hear us for miles. If you do something that interests them enough, they don't think anything of covering 2 or 3 miles in a pretty short time to get to you to check you out. But if you're on the wrong side of the ridge, you won't hear them and they won't hear you. And you might literally be, a half a mile apart. But because of weather conditions or terrain conditions, you never make contact. You never know. But I've had people, we'll be out rooting around and all of a sudden, they're pointing and look, I just saw one. He just crossed the road right there. I'm thinking, yeah, right. They're just, they're anything. It was a deer or they saw a hog cross the road or something. And we go up there, by God, there's tracks. I have been amazed more times at people seeing stuff on our outings. I didn't believe it. I thought they were just, exaggerating or their imagination was running wild. And, I've seen that happen too, but I've been also astounded of where people have said they saw something. We go up there and there's the evidence of it. There's a smoking track. Or a bunch of, busted up, tree limbs and stuff. And tracks. Or you go up there and you can still smell it. We've had just crazy things happen to us out there. And, all I gotta say is, anybody that wants to sit back and throw rocks, just grow you a set of cojones and come with us sometime. I don't mind taking skeptics out. I've done it a bunch of times. And I've made believers out of people too. And so has Bear.
Oh, that goes without saying. Since I have known about instances where you've been taking people out to show them your ability to call these things in, I think that stretches back to around 2008. I have yet to come across one person like that who's been out with you in the field that didn't come back convinced that you had that ability. I can't tell you how many people I've spoken with who, as a result of going out with you into the field, saw a Bigfoot. So, whereas I haven't been out with you when you've called one of these things in, or when someone in your party has seen one, I can tell you, having spoken with so many people over the years who have been out in the field with you, I'm convinced that you back up what you say. I've got no doubt that your claims about being able to call them in are 100% genuine.
One of the best proofs that I had a German guy at work that was giving me in front of everybody. I mean, he'd get on my case right in the lunchroom at work, and right in front of God and everybody, and just was doing his best to make my life miserable and make me look like an idiot. So I knew the guy. He had a big ego, so it was going to be decent weather one evening. The bad part about it was really rotten weather, so I couldn't challenge him till I could actually do something about it. So finally one evening, there was some decent weather. So he started that crap right there in the break room one day, and so I said, tell you what, big mouth. I said, you're so big and brave and so sure about this stuff. Why don't you just put your money where your mouth is and go with me this evening? He said, well, I can't stay out all night, and we have to work the next day. He said it in his, I can't imitate a German accent, but, I said, I'll have you back home by 10 o'clock at the latest. I said, I might even have you back home by 8. This guy was single, so I knew he couldn't use his wife or his excuse or anything. I said, we're going to get in the truck, or we can go in your car, whatever. We're going immediately after work. Oh, no. I said, well, then if you ain't got to get off here and go with me and just see, then you ain't got any right to be throwing rocks at me, to be trying to, make me look like a fool here. You don't go, you're a yellow-bellied coward wimp. You want to run your mouth, but you're not willing to back anything up. Well, that got him. And everybody, a bunch of people, ooh, So, I'm just hoping and praying that the boogers will be around somewhere down there. And, so we got off work, we got in my truck, and he said, I'm not taking my car. You know, of course, he had I think he had an Audi or something like that, being a German, and he went, I'm not driving my car down there. So we got in my truck, and off we went. And I drove him down to a place. Very first place we went was a place right off the side of a major road through the area. I pulled off, and it's an area where the boogers have always been quite active, even during daylight hours. One of the few places that we could pretty consistently get responses to our calls, even during the daylight. We pulled off. I let loose with a call. I didn't even wait. This place there is one of the few places that I'll go into and won't even, cool my heels for 20 minutes before I call. We just got out of the truck, listened for maybe a couple of 3 minutes, and I let loose with a call. And, he said, I know, one of the first people I heard out of him, God, he's let loose, some kind of German cuss word. And the really good part about it was almost instantly I got an answer, but it was a way distance away, but he heard it. That's the main thing. He said, what was that? He said, was that one? I said, yes, it was. And so I waited a little bit, and I called again. It instantly answered again, and it was obviously closer. Even he could tell it was closer. We waited, and before I called again, it called again. And again, it was very obviously closer coming towards us. So I gave it a short answer back, and normally there is a big culvert under the highway there. And normally they come under the highway in this culvert, and then they circle around under a high bank, sort of to the west of us. And this is in the area that you've heard Bear and I talk about, we call AP Road. Old Pucker Road. That's what we call this place. They normally, fairly consistently, when they show themselves, it's at this one particular place. Well, I don't know why, but I'm standing there looking off down the hill towards, to see if I could see one on this old road bed. And all of a sudden, the German beside me goes crazy, and he's pointing down the hill into this picnic area. And I look down there, and there is standing beside a big trash bin down there in the picnic area, standing there looking up at us. And the German saw it before I did. In fact, I don't know if I'd ever seen it. I was looking in the wrong direction. But he saw the thing. He instantly knew that that's what it was, and it absolutely scared him to death. I thought he was going to wet himself. As soon as he convinced himself that that's what he was seeing, he ran and he jumped in the truck. And he said, we gotta go. And I said, it's not going to hurt us. Don't you want to see it? I mean, this is what you came here for. And so eventually he opened the truck door and he stepped out and he's looking at it through the crack between the door of the truck and the body of the truck. Then he realized that to get out of there, we had to drive right through that picnic area.
Oh, no.
So he decided, well, maybe we didn't need to go right then. So, I made a little bitty, short little call, and it screamed at us in a very aggravating tone. The German jumped back in the truck and slammed the door and locked them. Again, good thing I had my keys in my pocket. And it screamed at us a couple more times, and then it sort of, turned around and it went walking off down in the woods. I waited a while, and he cracked the door of the truck open. He said, is it gone? Is it gone? I said, it's probably watching us still. I said, it hasn't gone too far, I don't think. And he says, oh, how do you know that? And I says, well, just listen. And I made another call, and it screamed back. And I said, see there, it's not very far. And he starts letting loose a bunch more cussing. Anyway, we waited about 30 minutes, and we heard it again off moving away from us. It made another call. By this time, it was getting well into dusky dark. We got in the truck, and I couldn't get out of there fast enough to suit him. He kept hollering at me, faster, faster, go faster. We finally, I said, it ain't gonna jump on the hood of the truck. You know, it's not, you don't have to worry about it. I wouldn't have brought you down here somewhere where you're gonna get killed.
Yeah, I'd say you made a believer out of him.
Oh yeah, next day at work, he was real quiet. They got to teasing him. What'd you see? Did you see anything? Did you see? Don't want to talk about it.
Another satisfied customer. Yeah, I don't think you ever had to worry about hearing any flack from him again. Well, Coonbo, I've got to wrap this show up. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time and all of the stories and info.
Well, this is a venue that I have not been on before. I've not been on your show before, so I'm getting to the point where I don't mind telling the stories over again, but I'm glad to tell them to people who may not have heard them before. Also, I'm to the point now, at my age and in my maturity in this subject, I like to teach people about them. I still like to get out in the woods a lot and everything, but I enjoy teaching people about them really more than I enjoy telling the stories over again. But I will tell the story to make an educational point. But I really appreciate you having me on your show, Vic.
I can tell you right now, I've known this man since 2008, and I can't think of anyone better than him or Bear, his buddy, to learn from with regards to going out and finding these things. They know so much, it's just unbelievable. Thanks again, though, Coonbo, for your time and for coming on. I really do appreciate it.
You're very welcome. I'm honored to be here.
Well, thank you. I would tell you not to be a stranger, but I know I'll see you around, so I don't have to worry about that.
I still need to drag you down to the LBL.
You wouldn't be the first or last person that's trying to get me down to that place. Good luck on doing that.
You never can tell.
Well, yeah, you can keep trying, but I don't think the chances of that are going to be all that high. Thanks again, though, and have a great night.
You too.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. If you've had a dogman encounter and you want to speak with me, whether in private or on the show, you can reach me at contact@dogmanencounters.com. I'd love to hear from you.